the stories you've heard. They don't tell the whole truth.
That last sentence at the end of the video there, I feel like has aged rather well in regards to New World. And in today's video, we are going to be covering this channel's first video game review. We're going to be covering it based on 5 categories, and we're going to be ranking up to 1 point in each category. If it scores a 3 out of 5, then that gets my thumbs up, kind of like seal of approval for the game. And starting out with the 5 categories, those are going to be mechanics and innovation, visual and audio aesthetics, longevity and replayability, is it memorable, and cost to enjoyment. And at the end of the video, I'm even going to toss in some additional thoughts and kind of comments that really reflect my personal feelings after having played the game for about 70 hours. Diving into the first category with the availability of 1 point is going to be mechanics and innovation. I'm going to cover some key topics here on why I think the game deserves or does not deserve this point. And in this category, I'm going to actually give New World a point for its level of innovation. It does a pretty good job of capturing a really good action combat feel in an MMO, which I have seen other games try and do and more or less fail. I do have some criticisms in this category for New World where I think they could do some improvements, but I think all in all they kind of knocked it out of the park. So there's a few things I want to kind of highlight here that lead into this game's innovations. First one, camp system. I think being able to set up a new spawn point within the vicinity of where you're going to be doing a lot of questing or any of that, or any kind of anywhere you're going to be spending any significant amount of time, and having other people have the option to kind of come in and set up, use your camp, and kind of enjoy that with you. I feel like that sets for a nice little surprise when you first start New World, because I hadn't watched any videos on it, so it was a really nice surprise. Well thought out too. I like that it increases in spawn radius as the higher tiers go up. Next up, because I am actually going to be so this is going to be covering Angry Earth section of things as well. The flail. I love the flail. I love the implementation. I love using the weapon, and I love the way it interacts and the role it fills, so to speak. And the other thing is, most MMOs do not have a solid introductory area. They do not have a good tutorial. You kind of just dropped in on an island, left. Hey, figure it out, man. New World has a whole cinematic approach to its opening, which is both a positive and a negative. I'll cover why it's a negative at the end of the video. Next up is visual and audio aesthetics. This category I am not going to be giving a New World a point in, oddly enough. So one of the things I think New World is really good is it has beautiful scenery, beautiful rays. The effects for weather implementation and the way it sets moods is phenomenal. But the graphics in this game are medium tier at best to low. I don't know what it is about the game. I don't know why. But for whatever reason, I had issues with the game maintaining good solid textures and good solid detail in certain areas. It was not consistent and nowhere near the tier of what I believe an MMO should have been releasing with in the 2020s. I realize it came out in 2021, but what I mean by 2020s is after the year 2020. This is not an acceptable entry level for an MMO, especially not when you consider the competition in the space today. Next up, we have longevity and replayability. This category is normally one that MMOs get for me just by default. When you have an MMO that's fully fleshed out, you have great longevity to just a single playthrough without having to create a new character, and you have a ton of replayability in the endgame. But unless you're a hardcore PvPer, New World does not have what you were looking for. The main story quest is rather uninteresting. Sorry, I don't mean to be that harsh, But it got really boring. Not saying people couldn't finish it, it just got so boring no one wanted to. So I started first, right, when I started leveling, just to kind of like set the perspective here. And then I had some friends join in, and they bought the game on sale and everything, and started playing through. Didn't even make it to level 60. One person made it to level 50 in the East. One person did hit max level, but everyone else just quit in the mid 30s. And that's a point and a topic I'm going to touch on later on, because it seems like everything up to level 30 is really good, really well polished, and then everything after that is where you start to see the wheels fall off the wagon, so to speak. On to category number 4. Is it memorable? I'm going to give a point in this category. New World has, especially in the beginning 30 levels of the game, something that really sets the tone for you. It's got like a really good atmosphere. It's got some actually rather unique enemies, which is part of the reason I gave it the innovation point before. When you pair these together and everything's working great and everything looks good, you have it that sticks in your brain. Anytime you go and watch like any level playthrough or anything else, or you see people commenting on New World, they remember it. They have a memory of like the areas and the vistas and everything else they see. So this one is an easy slam dunk point for New World. On to the last point. Cost to enjoyment. Or is the game worth the money? You know? This is a question people ask a lot, especially when they're considering purchasing a new video game for themselves, right? And MMOs can really be like a little bit harder to quantify that question for, right? So my general rule of thumb is I will only dig into an MMO if it fits into my payment criteria. Typically, when I consider the big 3 forms of ROI for the people who build the game and everything, when you got your box model where you purchase the game and the expansion, and then you have your $15 subscription or your subscription model, and then microtransactions. If it has all 3, I generally won't play it. I feel like that's too much. I realize you can increase the price of microtransactions and fill the void, but if you're doing that and a monthly subscription and buying the game, that's a lot. Now, New World just has purchasing and microtransactions. There's no subscription for it. So you would think that by my own rule set here, it's a pretty easy slam dunk here. And for the most part, I thought it would be just because of that, right? But when you consider that New World base game is still $40 and Angry Earth is $30, that means to get into the game and fully enjoy it, you're looking at spending $70. You might be like, okay, that's the cost of a normal game in today's market, right? That's not unreasonable. When you consider the other MMOs on the market in this space, that starts to get rather expensive. Unless you plan on playing for a long time. But if you just want to play short term, like 3-4 months, and then hop off and go play something else for a little bit, this is not great. Because you can, if you want to consider something else a little more action oriented, like excuse me, like Elder Scrolls Online, you could just pick up the base game for $20 and then pop a $15 ESO subscription, and you got everything but the newest expansion, and you can go and spend your whole life away on getting caught up to the current state, That puts this at a relatively bad value in comparison on just that basis alone. Now, there are some points on this I want to talk about in the aftermath, but I do not give it a point in this category for this, especially because of how little content you get out of Angry Earth. It's almost the same price as the base game. That's a tough pill to swallow for a zone and amount, from what I can tell. I tried playing through the level 60 to 65 zone, but it's mainly just a bunch of trees and vines, and no one's in there. No one's playing it. Everyone's off doing PvP and what little they can of the end game content because no one wants to play it. So from that regard, I consider this to be not a great value unless you really like MMO PvP, in which case, knock yourself out. Here we are at conclusion time. With all that being said, that leaves New World leaving with 2 out of 5 points, right? that does not get my level of a recommendation for a game. Now, that's how I feel for this current year and where it's at today. MMOs change over time, and I was honestly hoping that Angry Earth would be like the Heaven's Ward like it was for Final Fantasy XIV. They seem to have a little bit of a miss here, which is why I think they put the mounts in Angry Earth. And I was reading some comments on some of the Steam reviews and everything, and people were talking about how it's a lore thing. And I'm not sure I buy that, because New World, as a whole does not feel finished. It feels like they did a fantastic job building the introductory beginner areas. They built a nice prologue, cutscene, did all this wonderful work. And you get a nice experience boost your movement. It doesn't even feel like you're playing an MMO until you get up to level 30. Because of how quickly things move along and how well you are paced with experience for what it is you're doing. One thing, because everything's so consolidated in that first zone, you do like a good amount of leveling there. Probably too much. The game is split into zones for levels that you should realistically be doing, but you never have to do and you never get to experience. The game at no point pushes you into the new zones to go level here or go over here and do that. If you've ever played like Classic WoW or World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King, you know what I'm talking about having areas to go and experience and do your leveling in, and about how that takes time. New World, you breeze right through it, and then as you go along, it really slows down. This is not something that is really beneficial to your target audience, people who want to play the game as an MMO. Because like I said, had a lot of people start falling off after level 30. And I think that's because once they got out of that like beginner craze section and all that boosting they got, they were playing almost a different game. And that's also when you start to see a lot of the repetitiveness of the copy and paste going on. Those really cool enemies you see them all over again. You don't know if you're going to get, when you go to a new zone, you don't know if you're going to get the ones that have a higher health pool or just deal more damage. And so, but they're either always ghosts or they're always the graveyard people. By the way, if any of the developers are seeing this, the graveyard dude with the coffin on his back that spins around, uses a shield, and sucks your life to heal himself, that is an awesome enemy, and please do more designs like that, because that's cool. Like, I don't know what else to say. I'm going to dig into the reason why I think the mounts should have been in the base game and not on Angry Earth. And that's because I feel like they were designing the game originally with the intent to put the mounts in the game, but ran out of time to implement. And they put it in the Angry Earth as an incentivizing reason for you to buy it. That's honestly how I feel, because if you go back through and you play through the game and you look at roads and all that other infrastructure stuff, that pokes some pretty big holes in the theory that it's a lore thing, because they have carts all over the place and obvious things that are meant to be toned by wild farm animals. And the roads are big enough for a couple players to be across most of the time. You have a couple little country roads and whatnot going along. But the game was very clearly developed with horses and mounts in mind. And I hate to see that it ends up behind the DLC paywall. And normally I wouldn't complain about it because they're adding a new feature. But like, with how unfinished the game is and how unfinished certain sections of the game are, it becomes a very glaring problem, and I understand why people are mad about it. In any other MMO, anytime they've introduced new mounts, flying mounts, any of that jazz, it's in the DLC. And no one complains about that. They might groan a little bit, but I understand why in this particular situation, people are making such a big fuss about it. Up till now, my review of the game has been fairly negative. But I don't want to give the impression that I don't feel like there's hope for the game or that the devs are not working hard. If you watch any of the dev showcase, you can really see that they are willing to sit down in front of a camera and take the community's feedback.
counter the staggering imbalance of factions in open world during influence races. The bug with Boltcaster elemental damage conversion for PvP was known to YouTubers since it came available. Is there plans to add more than 2 mutators per cycle?
Yeah, I've seen this question a lot. We're working on.
All right, quality of life and balancing. Get your anti-cheat working. There are multiple videos on YouTube of known hackers and OPR. They have been reported and everyone in each world server knows about them. How are you not banning them? Why is that not a priority? Edit. And no, your data does not show that there are no hackers. There are hackers. If you played the game, you would know that.
Yes, so we
That's willing to sit there and take that day to day and try and do patches, try and do improvements, and try and work through it. They get a thumbs up for me, you know? I give the team a thumbs up, the game not so much. Unfortunately, though, I still feel like this game was developed from its core concept in a corporation, and I mean that in the most negative way of how like corporations process things. This game, the story, the way factions work, character development, all this stuff makes me think that when they were developing this game back in the studio and they were trying to develop what kind of MMO they were making, that they had a bunch of data analysts come up with all these most popular like sections, categories, or like most sought after things, and just had execs toss on a dartboard or dart at a dartboard with these papers on them, and then what they landed on is what ended up in the game. So like, what's the most popular race? Oh, obviously humans. Oh, people love good versus evil. Let's do that. Light versus dark. You know, everyone seems to love that theme. Oh, who doesn't love like old pirates and ships and everything? You know, just these types of things really stand out as a little overdrawn in New World. I don't know whose decision it was to create factions and not consider letting players create a corrupted race rather than just the human at the start of the game, and then having like a similar setup to like any red versus blue conflict setup. Like, they have all the makings for it. Why not let them do it? You could change their languages. That way they can't natively talk to one another. That could encourage all of the zone-based PvP and everything, because from what I've seen, the third faction kind of just gets left in the dirt. It's mainly the two big factions. The third one just kind of runs around, does what it can. So I think that kind of aspect in making each one seem like you're probably the good guy and they're really the bad guys, you know? I think that's far more interesting than what they've kind of set up here. I still think they could do that, but I don't know why they went the direction they went with that, because I feel like that could have started a lot more world PvP sessions and all that jazz, and made for some rather interesting, like a rather interesting main story quest trying to explain that to players. It would also create a rather incentivizing idea on why you'd play the other faction instead of just like what you perceive as the good guys. You know, there's all sorts of options there and whatnot they had, but it just seems like they released the game rather early, unfinished, copy pasted the good stuff they had, copied the good stuff they had, pasted it over, and just moved on. Now they're kind of dealing with the backlash. Some people, you know, will make the comment like, oh, it seems like it was made on a Friday, you know, kind of thing. And I don't agree with that, because there are so many sparks of brilliance in the game. Things that really stand out, things that really shine. Some of those zones where the scenery is set and everything looks really good, like in some of the graveyards. Chef's kiss, right? But in like Restless Shore, I don't know how it's the same game. It's so mind-boggling, like separated and jarring. It's like they have a team of competent experts that have been in the industry a long time, and then people fresh out of college. And there's like no middle ground. And now they're playing catch up for a lot of that. So I imagine them spending a good chunk of the remaining of the year trying to really get the game where they want it. And after seeing their the New Year's celebration piece they put out, I have every expectation they will try and deliver on it. I just don't think 2024 is necessarily going to be the year that New World really stands up and shines. I think they're on the right track for 2025, though. They just have a lot of work ahead of them.